Welcome to today's video. Eric Mullendijk and I sit down to have a really great dialogue on leadership. Eric is a national leader with the Disability Foundation, plays a major role with the Tetra Society. Just a quick reminder, Karma Lead is a channel that's all about leadership. Enjoy today's video.
Well, I wanted to say good morning to everybody, and maybe you can see on Zoom it says Eric Mullendijk, BC Moss, and what does that mean? Well, so BC Moss is one of the societies that make up the Disability Foundation, and I have the privilege of being a program manager for societies that make up that foundation. The Tetra Society, which is a national organization, BC Moss, that's the name on our Zoom account, but that stands for the British Columbia Mobility Opportunities Society. And we also have an adapted sailing program. Hello, Mark. Thank you.
Good morning, Eric. How are you today?
Good. Thank you for this conversation. So, and again, through your work, there's been some new endeavors, and you've developed some new things. So we'll get to that. You said you were developing your own leadership style.
Yeah.
And I think, you hear people say, "Oh, I'm not a leader." That can be a scary term for a lot of people. And how did you know it was the right time for you to take that leadership role? It can be, like you said, it can be quite a thing to, you're looked to help guide the way or look after some young people, and you're all in a canoe, right? You're literally navigating rough water. So you've got people out of their regular element, right? So how did you know in your own mind, hey, I can do this, I have something to offer?
That's such a great question, Eric. Is you're really asking, was there a moment when I defined myself as a leader? And the answer to that is no. I showed up as a human being and developed my skills to help others and make a difference. And I've always had that passion for making a difference. I started my career in social work and evolved into business, and I'm saying very large business, like Fortune 2000 companies, and then kind of evolved into a consulting and leadership practice. But along the way, there was no moment where where there was this kind of moment, now I'm a leader. I really think that leadership comes from anywhere, any place, anytime. It's not a position. Think about Malala, the young girl from Pakistan that is passionate about education for young women. She was 14, 15, when she hit the limelight. What about Greta Thunberg, the climate change activist who spoke to the United Nations? A 14 or 15-year-old young woman. Would she define herself as a leader, or is she passionate about making a difference in the world? And I think this is the core of leadership, is that we really want to deploy our skills to make a positive difference in the world. Just a little aside, I Googled leadership on Amazon, in the bookstore. I think I got 63,000 hits on leadership. So there's a wide range of literature and definitions of leadership. And I think leadership, whether you define yourself as a leader or not, you make a difference in what you do. Deploy and say what's on my mind or take action as a leader is critical. So humor, fun, respect, courage, and purpose driven, I think would describe me, Eric.
Great. And so, how did you make the decision to start your own business? What were some of the steps that brought you to that? I've kind of talked a little bit about how we've worked together, but I really want to make sure people understand how they can work with you. So if they come across Mark Fulton and think, I want more leadership in my organization, talk a little bit about, as you were starting out, because you've always told me the story, hey, I was starting out, and you would meet with organizations, and for a while there, you thought you weren't needed because these organizations were telling you, oh, I've got that covered.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
Let's just kind of talk a little bit about what brought you to the point of starting your own business, because that can be quite, it's helped shape who you are today, and that can be quite a big step. So how did you get to, this is the path that I want to take for me?
Yeah, well, I do remember losing sleep when I was saying, oh my gosh, I'm going to start my own business, and I have an entrepreneurial side to me, Eric, where I like the idea of building a business, of a business that is purpose driven, and I realized that I had some skills that I could bring that would be helpful. And so I actually started my career in consulting as a facilitator. So I would facilitate. And I totally remember the story that you're referring to, which is I met with, several businesses that I was going to consult with, and I was talking about their vision and values. And oh, Eric, they had the most beautiful visions and values. And I remember going home and saying to my wife, I think I picked the wrong business because they already have everything organized. They've got their vision and values and so on. What I didn't realize at the time is there's two different types of values. There's the espoused values. Hey, this is what we say we're doing. And then there's the lived values, which is what you actually do. And everybody says the right things, but it becomes more difficult to actually live into those values. It takes courage to live into those values. And the moment I realized that, I said, aha, there is some work to do here, and I can be of service.
Right. The term that you taught our organization was values in practice. So what am I practicing in my my daily life? I guess it's kind of like buying exercise equipment, right? You can have it and it looks good, but you only really benefit from it if you use it, right?
That's right, Eric. I wanted to get in shape, and I joined the Y. I thought, yeah, turns out you actually have to go to the Y to get in shape. Yeah.
Right. You've got to do it. So talk a little bit about the different organizations, right? Somebody might be listening to this and thinking we're too small of an organization, but you've worked with all kinds of different groups and people, and like you said, I want to go back to something that you said. You meet with these organizations, and it does take courage because they're meeting you for the first time, you're meeting them. And of course, when we meet somebody new, we want to be our best self, right?
Yeah.
So nobody comes out and says, you know what, we're completely disorganized. We have all these goals, but we can't communicate.
Yeah.
So you really kind of talk about what a day working with you is like.
Yeah. Another great question, Eric, is, when you do the type of work that we do as leaders, and in particular, my role as a consultant and a leader and a developer of others, if you go into an organization, they want to look their best. Yes. You know, if I said, hey, Eric, I want to come over to your place and watch you make dinner. And then I'm going to tell you, where you went wrong in making dinner. And you're going to feel really uncomfortable. I just stand there and watch you. What's really important, and this is vital in leadership, is leadership is not about power. Leadership is about trust, meaning that if you and I are working together, and we do, you need to trust me so that you can tell me the truth about what's going on. And whether it's perfect or not perfect, or I need to work on this. And organizations, by and large, are like that. Leaders need to build trust. Now, one of the things that I noticed, I was in corporations and went up the corporate ladder, got the corner office. And, when you're in the organization, you do have positional power. I could make decisions about budget, about staffing, and manage it. I could make those decisions. And the moment that I left the organization and became a consultant, all that positional power left. So now I needed to have a different kind of power, which is a power to influence the organization. And that begins with trust. And trust really is somebody being able to say, you know what, we're really trying to figure this out. We're trying to figure this out. And I remember meeting with one small business owner, and he was having trouble with his accounting systems. And when he worked through his accounting systems, he realized all the errors that he had. And he knew in his industry there were lots of business failures. And he said to me, Mark, I don't know what those other folks are doing, but they must be really terrible if they're failing, because I'm looking at my business and I'm making all kinds of mistakes and I'm doing okay. But for him to be able to share that, needed to be able to build trust. And you're a leader, Eric, in your work, and that people need to trust you to tell you the truth about what's going on in your organization, right?
Yeah, and trust is a big thing in our personal life, in our professional life, and some people may be asking, what happens if I don't have that level of trust? That can be scary. And I just, because these are some of the things that you try to help organizations and hopefully the individual themselves deal with, right?
Yeah.
I think if you're part of a group or you have a shared passion, lots of people will say, well, I like working in a team. And one of the questions that always comes up is, what happens if the team dynamic is off and that trust has been broken?
Yes.
As leaders, is there a way to recover from that?
Yeah, great question. If trust has been broken, as a leader, it's your number one priority.
Hey, if you made it this far, be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps.
Right? When I bring on new staff and I orientate them, the first thing that I say to them is, here's our values as an organization. And one of them is honesty and openness. And I make it very clear as a leader, you're not going to get in trouble for making a mistake. Bring the mistake, we'll talk about it, we'll figure it out. It's learning, right? We learn. When we make mistakes, we learn and we gain wisdom. Where people will get into trouble with me is if they make a mistake and they try to hide it. Now we've got a low trust because they're trying to look good and they're hiding a mistake. And that's where they would get in big trouble with me. In organizations, as a leader, we need to know what's going on. And our people need to feel safe enough to come to us and be vulnerable and say, yeah, I'm doing well here. I made a mistake here. Mm-hmm.
And what is one of the successes that you're most proud of, right? Where you, because people would say, oh, I'd like to do that. And of course, through the work that you do, you help facilitate discussions to try to get to these answers. And
Yeah.
somebody might be wondering, well, give us an example, Mark, of, was there ever a time where you met with a group and kind of it was fractured, and then you re-met with them and you saw them rebuilt up?
Yeah. Oh, totally, Eric. I'll get team building calls. That I think when I worked with you and the Disability Foundation, that was a call that said, "Hey, we want to build our team," and I went in and did some values work and so on. That's one call that I get. The other call that I get, it kind of goes like this. It goes, "Hi, Mark. We hate each other. We're missing our goals, and we need help." Right? And there's lots of fear in those organizations because when there's low trust, we often see toxic environments start to emerge, meaning that people are talking behind people's back, they're gossiping, and people don't feel safe in the organization. And then I remember this was a medical team that I was working with, physicians, dietitians, social workers, diabetic nurses, and so on. So they were a team. And I remember the lead physician said to me, "They're all great people, but together we're not gelling as a team." And I remember going in to work with that group, and I could feel the fear. Here's the consultant coming in to tell us what to do. And I took a different approach, which is I started with a fun activity that helped them start to get to know each other, kind of safe. We did a little instrument. You remember the strength deployment inventory, Eric, eh? And, that helped them understand how they communicate. And I remember at the end of the work that I did with them, they were really an intact team, happy together, and really able to communicate. And I think it's where I'm able to make that kind of difference that's really rewarding to me. Quality leadership isn't just about, let's achieve our goals. I mean, that's part of it, and it's building trust. But if people work in a toxic environment and are very stressed, and today with COVID and all the things that are going on in this world, people are very stressed. And if their workplace is toxic, they go home and they're very stressed out. Imagine the 10-year-old coming home and saying, "Hey, Mom, Dad, I got an A on the paper. Leave me alone. I had a rough day at work." But if they work in a healthy work environment where they're feeling fulfilled and they go home and the 10-year-old says, "Hey, I got an A in my assignment," the person is more happy and willing to take the time to be with their child and their family. So really, by creating healthy, productive workplaces, and leaders play a huge role in that, we're actually impacting families. So I think the work of leadership really is so important. Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the things, Mark, that you'll often hear is, oh, they're a follower, not a leader. And through working with you, um, you've said and pointed out that being a follower doesn't have to be a bad word, and that everybody has a role. And as a leader, we're only leading if people choose to follow. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, Eric, I'm a follower, right? It's everybody in one person is a leader and a follower. I really view my role as a servant leader, which is a follower. How can I be of service? And I do have something to bring to the table. And when we've worked together, like on the Tetra conference, for example, and we were doing the design for that. I remember you developed the draft outline, or I developed the draft outline. We just worked together, and I followed your lead because Eric, you know what you need to get out of that. And if I don't listen to you and follow your lead, then I'm missing out. And at certain points, I need to step up and lead. And I remember you saying, well, Mark, that's not going to work here, or, here's what we want to do. And we need to hear from these folks. And then I would take that. So, leadership is this back and forth, follower, leader. I think where we get into trouble in organizations is when our ego is too high. You know what I mean? That we lose this idea of why we're there, which is of service to make a positive difference. And part of that means that you've got to follow. Leaders are followers. And by the way, leadership is not a solitary activity. It's not. It's about leading a group, an organization towards achieving its goals. And leaders, and I'm not saying positional leaders here, I'm saying leaders. Leader can be anywhere in the organization. So leaders and followers are together like this, so it's back and forth. If I don't listen to my people, then and I think I'm the smartest guy on the block, not really good for leadership, is it? I've got to hire people that are able to deliver. They've got to take leadership in their work. A great example of that is engineers. You work a lot with engineers, eh? And the recent grad has the latest knowledge. If you've been out of school for 15, 20 years as an engineer, wow, lots has happened in 20 years in the field of engineering. And so those new grads or recent grads coming out have the latest and greatest. And that senior leader engineer, if they don't allow those new grads to lead, they're going to really miss out on a lot of groundbreaking work and differences in the organization. Yeah.
And I just wanted to follow up. I think it can be hard. One of the things that you've kept referring to is leaders are learners, continue to learn.
Yeah.
And one of the things that can be hard, or some people might perceive as a weakness in leadership, is to admit a mistake. But to that, you would say,
yeah. Well, let's talk about what leadership is. Leadership is often getting off the beaten path. What I mean for that, think about, climbing a mountain, right? You're not on a paved road, you're off on the beaten path. And you're trying to figure out things in a very complex world. Think about when COVID hit. We all needed to adapt how we work together. Look at us on Zoom right now. And we needed to learn how to work in this new environment. But guess what? We didn't know all the answers. And being authentic is the most important element of leadership. It builds trust. Faking it, people know. People know when you're faking, that you pretend to know the answer. So being vulnerable is really key. And vulnerable means that I don't know the answer, or I made a mistake. And we really model the way as leaders, right? If people feel that leaders need to be perfect, then nobody wants to be a leader, right? Because leaders are just human beings that we're trying to figure things out. And guess what? When we're trying to figure things out, we make some mistakes, and we need to own our mistakes. And I just can't emphasize that being an authentic leader is so critical. And, I need to feel comfortable, even though I'm the highfalutin consultant working with you, Eric, that I've got to be able to say, made a mistake here, right? And I need to own up to you.
And it sounds like to me, from what you've explained, Mark, our mistakes that we might be afraid of making can be our best learning tool.
Totally. We learn from our mistakes. Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about COVID there, and definitely didn't want that to dominate the conversation, but it's helped bring you to where you are now. And what I wanted to talk about is how have you seen leadership change over the years? And what was somebody might be asking as a leader, how can I help myself and my team navigate with COVID? And if you wouldn't mind sharing, I know you really had to mentally change the way you do things.
Yeah.
And how you had to, and that's how Karma Lead came about. So let's just start with, how throughout your years, how have you seen leadership really change?
Yeah. Leadership is, I think there's a fundamental skill set that we have as leaders that doesn't change over time. What changes is the business context that we're in. And, if we think about communication, for example, if we look at, 1900, there was a great invention that happened in the late 1800s that revolutionized communication in business. And that was the invention of carbon paper, which meant now we could have 5 copies of the data. Yeah. So, in 1900, organizations were very hierarchical, meaning that we had the workers, we had the managers, and we had the senior leadership. And guess who had the information in those days? The senior leadership. So people would often defer to senior leadership because they had the knowledge. We only could make